Good evening, everybody, and welcome to XL Radio. It is my privilege to be with you on tonight to give some level of redress, reflection, and critical analysis on Trump's State of the Union address. I'm not sure how many of you watched it or tuned in, but I'm going to give you a recap and a very brutal assessment as to what it is that I witnessed and saw. I want to take a moment and ask of all of you to please share this with as many people as you possibly can. I want to give a perspective that I am confident will not be seen on mainline media on tonight, that you will not hear traces of on CNN, MSNBC, or even Fox, but I think are relative and germane to where it is that we are as a community and where we are as a people. So if you'll share this as quickly as you possibly can, and if you'll give me some indication as to whether or not you actually watched the speech tonight or not, or is this hearing your first foray into translation of what was said. But I've got a lot of ground to cover. You all know I try not to keep you long as much as I can. I don't even ordinarily, when I talk to you, don't even usually share notes, but I wrote so much down that I can't, there's no way I'm going to be able to remember all of this. All right, let's start in just one moment. Blessings to you. Sharon, if you haven't watched it, don't worry about it. After you see this, you'll feel like you are in the loop and not outside of the circle. So this ought to catch you up to speed. Before I even get into the body of the speech, several things that I want to give. I have to give high commendation, mad props to Aunt Maxine Waters. Refused to come to the speech tonight and protest through her absence, signaling righteous indignation that she was reclaiming her time and refused to waste her time with the foolishness and chicanery that she knew that Donald Trump was going to spew. Secondly, before I even get into the body of the speech, I have to thank the Congressional Black Caucus. The Congressional Black Caucus, if you did not see them tonight, they all wore kente strips. They all wore kente strips, colorful strips of African fabric in solidarity of African nations being disrespected by the president just a week ago, calling Africa and Haiti S-hole nations. And so the entire Black Caucus stood in allegiance by wearing kente strips. Is the very first time in the history of the Black Caucus, and particularly the State of the Union address, that the Black Caucus has made such a unified statement. And so I want to give them high accolades and great commendation for staying woke in a country that's obviously in a coma. So those of you that did not watch on tonight, I want to walk you through step by step what it is that took place, and what Trump said, what signals he was sending, and what was in fact articulated in between the lines and not spoken. He opened up by saying, "Each day since we have gone forward with a clear vision and a righteous mission to make America great again, there has been swift action." Now, I don't know what he's talking about that is happening quickly or swiftly outside of the division of the country, the morale of the nation, the standing of who we are on an international stage, but nothing has happened swiftly considering the fact that the president has failed to pass any real substantive piece of legislation and shut the government down for 2 days in a temper tantrum because they would not sign off to get his wall built. I want to jump into a couple of things. The first one is the president and owner of XL Radio said to me that he was, in fact, elated by Donald Trump, and that Donald Trump has done more for blacks and unemployment than Barack Obama did. Regrettably, the owner of this radio station is drinking the Kool-Aid with a straw. The statistical data has shown in no uncertain terms that black unemployment is higher now than it has been over the last 8 years. He is speaking to Donald Trump's trying to throw shade at Jay-Z, who in fact called him out for really burdening black people and hiding behind the likes of Omarosa, the preacher in Cleveland, and Ben Carson. And the reality is that black people in under a year have seen less economic opportunities, less jobs opening up, and this is Robin Hood in reverse, that the poor are getting poorer and the rich are getting richer. There is not anybody in the black community that is doing better than they were under Barack Obama. Omarosa couldn't even keep a job for a year. So let's not go there. Let me now go into the body of what it is that the president you all elected by not going to the polls a year ago. Let me get right to the heart of it. He said in his unifying theme, let's dream about what kind of nation we can be. One team, one people, and one American family. Now I'm wondering, even at the very premise, how unified are we when the Republicans wish to work with the Democrats? Over a week ago, when the budget was up for debate and vote, McConnell knew that he did not have the votes enough to get it passed. He was 10 shy and short. And rather than negotiate and work and compromise with the other side of the aisle, which would be the Democratic Party, he lifted it up to vote anyway, knowing it would shut down the government. I want to know, logically, how patriotic are you if you're willing to shut down the government that you love? If you have that kind of loyalty, that kind of allegiance, why would you knowingly and willfully leave millions of people literally outside of the scope of job security, outside of insurance, outside of federal protection of the law, and give absolutely no redress to voter suppression? Nothing was said on the fact that if voting rights was lifted or voter participation was lifted just by 10% in this midterm election, it would completely tilt the foundation of the basis of authority in both the House and in the Senate. We can't make America great again because the premise is false. We were never great the first time. You can't be great when at no point do you ever acknowledge the blood, the sweat, the tears, and the sacrifice of stolen Africans who built this nation on our backs and were never given a dime in reparations. You cannot make America great when it is that you stole almost 1 million slaves from the belly of Africa, and after you gutted of its resources, of its people, of its national treasures, and then call it an S-hole while you sit on the toilet and watch it flush and then try to sell it out to China and to other parts of America. Just as you're in a speech tonight for over 80 minutes, how do you make America great again and never be mindful of your willful negligence to refuse the rebuilding of Puerto Rico because you promised to your friends that they would be able to divide the island just so that they could have developmental property for golf courses and for hotels? How do you make America great again when you bring in all of the presidents of HBCUs and give them a camera op, and then when they walk out, do absolutely nothing to fortify the funding and finances that are needed that you said you were going to do, again, saying you were going to do more than Barack Obama and still have not yielded anything? How in the world do you make America great again when you put Ben Carson over housing, when he has absolutely no housing experience, that he's teetering on the brink of senility? And the truth of the matter that the people who are within the Department of Housing are reporting back to me that he's not even doing the work, that his wife has to come in every day just to make sure that his sensibilities are intact, that he knows what it is that he's signing, and doesn't even have the faculties to maintain a staff meeting without his wife doing so. How do you make America great again when you find yourself last week traveling to boast on the claims of America being number one, but the American press so jaded, so in fact narrow-minded and myopic in its perspective, never showed the thousands of protesters outside who didn't even want him to come into the nation because they knew that he is in fact a high practitioner of xenophobia and refuses to allow other people who do not have his pedigree to have access to power or for wealth building. We can't build a unity team if you are in fact emptying out the dugout. The national anthem was in fact referenced in the speech. And the reason why this is important is that he brought that up to throw shade on the brave and the bold football players who stood in alignment and allegiance with Colin Kaepernick and took a knee. And lest we forget that that is, in fact, a part of our constitutional right, and what makes America great is our capacity and ability to protest in the face of injustice without the fear of reprimand or incarceration. But yet, the President of the United States would make open and veiled threats against those who are, in fact, exercising their right to take a knee. Muhammad Ali said many years ago, why in the world would I in fact go and fight in Vietnam when it was never the Vietnamese that called me nigger? It was people here, but you expect me to fight. I'm telling you, black people have been more patriotic than any other ethnicity in the nation. No other nation has laid down its body and its life and given as many of our sons as black people in this country. How in the world are we oppressed and loyal? I know I'm getting ready to get in trouble tonight, but y'all got me riled up. We are oppressed and loyal. We have absolutely no right and no business serving in a government that never in fact regarded us. And yet year after year, we let them into our churches and into our schools, allow them to register, and we sign up for a country that always makes us last. And we put them first. We only use African American, watch this, in our name, but never in our conscience. The reality is that most of us have never taken a trip to Africa, never do business in Africa, never think about trade in Africa, never think about supporting Africa, and we bought into a false narrative that Africa is just filled with drought, poverty, and civil war, not knowing that most of our copper, our gold, our rubber, our diamonds, our silver, and all of the instruments that are needed and necessary to run a Samsung or an iPhone are hewn and stolen out of Africa, and you don't even have enough sense to celebrate yourself. The next shift was around health care. And the question that I've got to ask, is that if in fact it's good for one, then it ought to be good for all. How do the same U.S. senators that want to suppress universal health care have that same coverage for them and their families absolutely for free? Y'all ain't saying nothing to me. If it's that bad, senators, then y'all don't take it. Congress people, then you don't take it. America is the only industrialized nation in the world that does not offer to its citizenry health care. We do not value life in this nation. And so you've got the hypocrisy of white evangelicals who cry and scream about being pro-life and are anti-abortion. But if in fact that's where it is that you stand, I want to know, after the black babies are born, since you are pro-life, why then do you take away money for health care, for Head Start programs? Why in the world do you not offer services for mothers in prenatal? Why in the world do you take away and bleed out the money for public school systems? Why in the world do you do tracking by the 4th grade to make sure that the prisons are high tech, but the high schools and the public schools are low density when it comes in terms of proficiency, education, and being able to compete on a world stage? I need to know if in fact you're pro-life. How are you pro-life but for the death penalty? White evangelicals, you got hell to pay, because the gospel that you preach is erroneous and it is not consistent with the word of God. But these evangelicals who preach and spew this kind of venom are bastardizing the gospel. But it is consistent to the same gospel that was preached from those slave owners that would get up on Sunday and preach to the slaves, slaves, obey your masters, and then Monday rape our grandmothers and act like they don't even recognize their own bastardized children that they threw out right into the cotton field. It's the same evangelical spirit that will in fact allow you to believe you go to a multicultural church where's a white pastor with a church full of black people, but the only people counting the money is white people. Don't talk to me about a post-racial society when still the most segregated hour in America is still 11 o'clock on Sunday. And yet it is the white evangelicals, might I remind you, who a year ago said Donald Trump was God's man. Something is out of order with that. I'm talking to you, Jensen Franklin. I don't care who your father is. You out of order, and the gospel you speak does not reflect the revolutionary mind frame of Jesus Christ. I don't care who you are, Paula White. I don't care what stage you preach on. I don't care what black people you go in there for. I don't care that you stole a church from Zachary Timms and now you espouse a slave doctrine is completely out of order. And woe unto y'all Negroes who still sit under that foolishness and yell preach, but won't go to a black church and claim you ain't learning nothing. What? You brainwash without a conditioner, and your hair's dripping because you don't even understand what it is that you're being taught. You got to ask yourself, how is it there are black Republicans who have been faithful to the party, black Republicans who got a mind frame to think, but none of the black Republicans around Donald Trump are articulate? None of them have a resume. None of them have a vita. None of them, ladies and gentlemen, have performed. At what hour do you justify Mark Burns being in your space? In what way do you put Ben Carson, who said of himself, of him being nominated to be the Secretary of Health and Human Services, that he did not have what it took to run health, but you can run housing? Come on, y'all. Come on, y'all got to wake up. That preacher in Cleveland, I don't even want to speak his name out loud, who's running behind him. He ain't an aide, he's an armor bearer. And we're missing all of it. That ain't even what I came on for. Donald Trump said we built the Empire State Building in just 1 year. We built the Empire State Building in just 1 year, so it shouldn't take 10 years for you to get a permit to build. I sat on the edge of my seat and said, he talking about the development and the infrastructure bill of what it takes to revitalize the bridges and the highways and the landmass in this country. You're going to talk about that and talk about labor and business deals? I'm sitting on the edge of my seat. Here he is. Right now is where he's going to talk about reparations. That's where my mind is. If you're talking about what it takes to build this nation, and never once do you give a debt of gratitude to the nameless and faceless black people in this nation that built the building you gave the speech from, never once do you acknowledge the work and the sacrifice of Crispus Attucks. Never once do you acknowledge it was a black man that designed Washington, D.C. and the Washington Monument. Never once do you acknowledge it was the nation's capital that was built by slaves that they dragged in from Portsmouth and Norfolk, Virginia, and from North Carolina. Never once. And you talking about a permit to build? I say to you, President Trump, that if in fact there's going to be an infrastructure readjustment, that nothing ought to be built in this nation. If you aren't going to give us reparations, then you got to give us a seat at the table. The reality is nothing of any significance ought to be built in this nation without black contractors at the table, without black developers getting a piece of the pie. It was, in fact, that great, strong sister, the civil rights movement, who said in no uncertain terms, if you don't have a seat at the table, then you on the menu. We cannot talk about economic development without talking about economic parity. In a moment of reflection, Martin Luther King Jr. said to his close friend, confidant, and supporter, Harry Belafonte, he said, I repent because I believe I have, in fact, integrated black people into a burning house. Dr. King raised the question, what was the point of me integrating for black people to sit at a lunch counter if they don't have money for a cheeseburger? Won't even understand that we are wealthy only with what's on our back, but we do not have wealth for what we built on our backs. So yes, I am for the infrastructure agreement, but I am only for it, hear me, if in fact you allow black and browns to sit at the table. And the reality, I want to say this so that there is no disparity, there is no confusion. Our Latino brothers and sisters are not our competition. They are our allies. Do you know what kind of a force we would be if black and brown people ever got together? Dr. William Barber said something that absolutely blew my mind. Said we gotta work with the Mexicans, because Mexico spoke out against slavery when it wasn't popular. We building a wall? If we're gonna build a wall, then the alt-right and these extremist Republicans who practice legislative terrorism ought to be put behind the wall. And those who in fact understand the base of the Statue of Liberty for those who are yearning to breathe free ought to be on the other side of the wall. How many of our brothers and sisters are behind prison walls unjustly? You want to talk about Donald Trump, that you want to do reform of the prison system, but you don't want to say anything about you being an investor in private prisons? Come on, y'all. If we're going to reform the system, tomorrow offer the piece of legislation that if in fact we are doing the legalizing of marijuana, then immediately our brothers who are incarcerated for possession and intention to distribute ought in fact be released. In Colorado, nobody ought to be in jail tonight for possession of marijuana if it is now free. If we want to reform the system, then we got to reform the system by immediately giving redress to driving while black. If in fact you're going to reform the prison system in America, then you've got to in fact revisit why it is that our black men and our black women are held behind bars before trial. But those with white collar crimes are going home to play golf with an ankle bracelet, watching us look like coons while they watch Love and Hip Hop. If we're going to reform the system, we got to reform the system. Here it is, so that we would understand that Dr. King was right, that poverty is the bride of crime. That if you want to fix crime in this country, then you got to fix the poverty issue. Our people are out here struggling on street corners, not because they want to, but because they don't have job opportunities, because they do not have opportunities that match their skill set. And if in fact you understand their skill set, let me ask you a basic fundamental question. If in fact these young brothers with 10th and 11th grade education with no MBAs were able to build multi-million-dollar drug infrastructures in inner cities, if in fact the system is not skewed, then why is it that when you legalize marijuana in these states, those that have a criminal record cannot own a dispensary? It's hypocrisy. You want to know the state of the union? This is the land of people that are not free and home of people that are not brave. Because if we were brave, we would speak truth to power. Dave Chappelle said something the other night in the middle of the Grammys. Here's what he said. He said, the only thing more dangerous than hearing a black man tell the truth in America is being that black man telling the truth in America. And here's the time where we can no longer sugarcoat the gospel, but we've got to, in fact, deal with it where it is, with no cotton candy. And a slap in the face to those who have been champions around the immigration issue. Donald Trump said, Americans are dreamers too. I don't know how it is that you're calling for unity when you would be that outright belligerent in dismantling those families that are being separated. Those who came here looking for asylum because they're running from warfare or persecution in their own country. America's dreamers too? What are you talking about? No. America's slave traders too. America's rapists too. America's thieves too. Burglars too. What makes America great is not that everybody came in on the Mayflower, but in the words of Malcolm X, the Mayflower landed on us. He said, I'm going to pull together, Trump said tonight, 4 different pillars around immigration. The very first one, are you all sharing this? I need you all to get this out as quickly as you possibly can. Help me get this word out, please. Please, I'm spitting real truth tonight. The 4 pillars around immigration. Number 1, a path to citizenship for 1.8 million undocumented immigrants brought to the United States in their youth. That's great. But while you're doing that, I need you to give a redress, President Trump, about ICE in the middle of the night going into communities and deporting Haitians and Nigerians, and the press never giving any word or report about that. Where is this path? That path you talking about is for those from Sweden and from Norway and from Ireland. But what about the children of the diaspora? What is the path for them? Or like Jimmy Hoffa, you just gonna bury us under cement? Number 2, he said border security in the form of building a wall on the southern border and hiring additional ICE agents. Here is a thought. Instead of hiring additional ICE agents, let's use that money. I'm not going to get a Nobel Prize for it, but I'm going to put it anyway. How about we use that money to give our teachers a livable wage? Why not use that money for the teachers and for the teachers' assistants who are having to spend money out of their pocket just to decorate their classroom? How about using that money to, in fact, use it for job training so that black people and brown people don't always go into the human resources department only qualifying for entry level positions but never finding themselves on the corporate ladder to success? How about using that money so that the public schools in America only piece of technology will not be a metal detector, but I don't know, can actually have computer labs? How about using that money so that we do not have to go into debt just trying to get higher education? No other place in the world is your college education debt greater than your credit card debt. And then I get out of school and I can't even find a job that is commensurate to the degree I just went into debt for. Come on, y'all. Y'all got to help me. Number 3, ending the visa lottery. That's good, our needs. The homeless and the veterans need that as well, on where is the assistance and the aid for our veterans who are coming through with PTSD. Number 3, ending the visa lottery. Trump's claims, watch this, that we have to stop randomly handing out green cards with any regard for skill, merit, or safety for our people. You got to hear what this president just said. That in order for you to get in the United States, you have to already have a skill, you have to have a merit that is not qualified or clear. And so what he is saying is that there's a different kind of vetting process that lends itself to classism. What it is that they did not teach us in elementary school or middle school is that when the explorers and the pilgrims first came to America, those of high regard and high estate did not want to come. So the people that they first sent in the first boats to come to the United States are criminals. Those people in the White House, on the Senate, on the Hill are the descendants of rejects and criminals and came here and tried to act bougie. And now you want to set up a rubric and a standard that your own ancestry could not have measured up against. What is the standard? If I'm coming here to get an education, to get a skill set and an opportunity, how would I already have it? Qualify it. This, ladies and gentlemen, is 21st century racism. We are in 2018 fighting 1827 demons. I want to say it again. We are in 2018 fighting 1817 demons. Something is out of order. The 4th one is ending the so-called chain migration. What is the chain migration? For those of you who are not familiar with it, the chain migration, he said, and I quote, is virtually unlimited numbers of distant relatives able to come in on your back. If you look at the appointments of who it is that Trump has put in the office, in place, and in position in this year, is simply, watch this, chain migration. There is absolutely no reason in the world for Ivanka to have Social Security detail service, and she does not work for the White House. She is not a risk to national security. Do you not understand that America in this first year has spent in excess of $25 million guarding the first family? It is the highest bill we have ever paid in the history of our union for Secret Service for Donald and Eric Trump, and their spouses also have a detail. Y'all not saying nothing to me. Y'all leaving me out here by myself. I'm telling you, they coming for me tonight. They coming for y'all tomorrow morning. Don't be complicit to what's taking place. If we're going to end this chain of migration, then we also have got to end this spirit of nepotism that has invaded the White House. I give you this last observation, and then I'm going to sleep. I got to go to Detroit tomorrow. I'm going to be on the Word Network with Tasha Cobbs and William Murphy live at 8:30. Those of you that want to meet me in Detroit, meet me at the Word Network. I'm opening doors at 7:30. We have a jam session, and then I'm going live at 8:30. Last point. Donald Trump said that a year ago he made a pledge to destroy ISIS, and 100% of the territory that ISIS occupied is now liberated. That's wonderful. That's great. But I want to know if in fact you can deal with the corruption of terrorism abroad. When will you deal with the corruption of the terrorism at home with over militarized aggressive policing? I am not saying that all police are bad. All I am saying is that the bad ones have got to be rooted out, and so that our people who happen to be American citizens will not have to live under imminent danger and threat of their lives. Ladies and gentlemen, I need you to hear me very, very, very carefully and very succinctly. We've got some dark and some difficult days ahead of us. This, ladies and gentlemen, is the 50th commemoration of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. We have evidence dating back to 1996, when the estate of Martin Luther King Jr. took the government of the United States to trial and proved in court, I need you to Google it, they proved in court that the government was responsible for the murder of Martin Luther King Jr. And then they turned around and named a holiday after him. Ladies and gentlemen, stay woke, because America wants you to have a jaded perspective as to what's taking place and what is at stake. On the 50th anniversary of the killing of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., I want to say this to you, please. I've got to say this to you, is that we are living in an hour where all of us have got to get ready for these midterm elections. What it is that we can do this fall and this spring. If you want to do something radical and revolutionary, register to vote, become an educated voter, and by all means, you got to go to the polls. We can shift America on its head this year. We don't have to wait until 2020. Y'all got to sign up to be precinct captains. You got to be observers to make sure that there's no voter suppression. You're going to have to help our seniors get to the polls. You've got to help enlist and engage millennials so that they understand the value of their vote. Because, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot roll over and play dead. We've got to rise up and understand that we are the generation that our ancestors were waiting on. We are the generation, here it is, of the survivors of slaves they could not kill and they could not break. Stay woke. This is, in fact, the redress for the yet-to-be United States of America. God bless you. Praying for you. Walk together, children. Don't you get weary. It's going to be a great camp meeting in the Promised Land.